actually talked a lot about, oh, we hate these classrooms and make some changes in them down here, as well as these, but we really concentrated on what we could do with this space, which was kind of a little bit different take on what the plan was, but the general idea was to have 3 different sizes of classrooms, the small one here, medium one there, large one there, with a student gathering hub in the middle.
And a little collaboration.
Yes,
Yeah,
collaboration.
and the smaller yellow area here, courtesy of Simon, would be similar, at least in concept, to the ones they have in Learning Commons, where I'm not sure what to call them, kind of collaboration breakout spaces. It's usually a TV mounted on the wall or monitor where they can connect if they want to do a rehearsal for a presentation or something like that. So, and then for the big room here, we're going to have them funnel out to the stairs there or the hallway here, so as not to all herd directly back into the common area here.
And there's also an opening there.
Yeah, we didn't really know so much on exactly where we're putting walls. We figured we'd leave that to, who's the architect in our group?
So these would be in small-sized tables no larger than these, and not too many tables. You've got to be able to move around the tables, get the students in and out quickly, but people need to move around. So I actually think there's too many tables in this room for the size of the room.
One option we discussed was having even much smaller tables that might be like trapezoidal shape, that might accommodate just 2 people on one side, 1 person on the other, but you can put trapezoids together in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
And accommodate a variety of sizes of class, and even have everybody
And people can set it up different.
Right.
Yeah, and then go back to the idea of chairs on wheels, color-coded, that nest together, with or without armrest.
And these tables could even flip up so they can nest, so you can open up the space in those situations where you want to.
With a steady sprinkling of monitors, whiteboards, and huddle boards.
Right, yes, that was important. Huddle boards, whiteboards, and setting them up. Also, the idea here was that we actually liked the Lincoln Center model, where there were 3, maybe or more tiers here with a step in between. But lots of places where, you know, ramps where you could go between the higher, middle, lower, or higher, middle, lower, however you did it, so that you would have the effect of the different heights. But the platform at each height would be plenty wide enough for a nice big table, and even for people to walk around it when it was full of people.
That said, we don't know about ceiling height. So if ceiling height is basically what it is here,
It wouldn't work.
yeah, all bets are off for tiers. And all
Hopefully you can direct some of that.
I have no idea how much.
I just had a thought about safety. If you have tiers and chairs on rollers, I noticed in that performance center that I had originally, they had for each tier they had a barrier.
You could put
which is
little,
unfortunate, but maybe you have
well,
to
no,
have
but
it.
no, you can put little kick things that go up a couple of feet that keep you
Really?
from rolling off. Yeah, so you
Have
have to wait.
Something like that. And then for these rooms down here that John mentioned, we like the idea of having some sort of retractable divider wall, because they're just too small to be of any use. I've taught it there before, and it's elbow to elbow the whole way. So if nothing else, make this into either one big room with a divider wall, and then it could be used as needed depending on which classes are scheduled in there with the grid, with all the other accessories.
Could it be just two classrooms, make 3 to 2?
Well, make it into 2, but with the divider wall, it could also be one larger one.
Okay.
If needed.
Another thing we forgot to mention, we thought that there would be glass partitions there, and maybe there. So that, you know, that what we're talking about, you know, how opening it up with glass, you can do that with that space.
Great.
What else did we forget?
Anything you want to add?
Yeah.
So
All 3 are set up with different shapes and different sizes. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's an opportunity to experiment with different types of furniture in each of these rooms too. So you have round tables and some, you have,
And that's got to come.
Well, Ken and I were talking, and a few times we've talked, and she's really, really swaying me on the idea that if you teach 200 students or 150 to 200 students at a time, you can't have the kind of personal connection with the individual instructor, obviously, that you would have with a classroom of 40 or even 50 or 60. But are we, and I've heard, she's talking, I'm talking to another group where to try to create intimacy in those very large classrooms. Is there any discussion amongst your group about that, like how to do that? I'm not the expert, you're more the expert than I am, but in terms of.
That's what we keep saying.
Round
But the round tables like this room are very different than round tables in a room large enough to accommodate 200 people. And is that under discussion? Because to me, if you've got 40 people, if you're a talented instructor of any kind, you should be able to foster some dialogue and some dynamics in there and not turn it into a passive learning environment. But with 220 people, you know, you're really up against a wall. So
There's scale-up classrooms that seat 100.
are we discussing that here for BGSU though?
I think we should discuss it.
We didn't discuss that right now, if that's what you're asking.
But for a
My
protocol for
guess is
all
that this
camp.
one might be, this is, and I don't have a sense of scale, but this might be up to 100.
Right, you may not have
And
enough
if you,
room for 180.
and if you had the acoustics and the ability to communicate, you could do it. And that would be an attractive environment, because with 100 people there, there's a sense of excitement and enthusiasm. You feel like there's more energy in the room.
You've got students teaching students.
Students are teaching students, and yet you can still, if you've got the right communication, you can still report out from each room, and an instructor, hopefully with TAs or peer facilitators,
Absolutely.
would be able to also, though, have some common sharing moments.
See, I think I'd flip it almost like the large the class, if we're gonna keep it intimacy, we need more reliance on the structure. With a small classroom like this, I mean, it's a lot more, there's a lot of ways you can go about it, because you've only got 40 or 50 people you're dealing with. But 220, you're really strapped, not falling into.
Well, I would agree with that. I think the point is that the smaller classroom, you can have like 2 tables put together to make a small group, or align them in different ways. When you have a much larger classroom, you don't have time between classes to rearrange the furniture.
You're right. Sorry, that's why I asked, because are we gonna ever talk about that as a group? Is that realistic for BGSU to actually create those kinds of classrooms for 200 students?
I would love us to try to do it, but the design characteristics are going to be different from the small ones.
Now, question, if you were to decouple and put a 200 seat scale up and say, we're gonna put it, but we're not gonna put it as part of the prototype, how does that change what you're trying to put into this? If you weren't trying to accomplish a 180 or 200 seat scale up, say that happened a year later in a different building, would you still try to do that big of a room?
If I could answer that, I mean, I think there are ways to do this and achieve both to a smaller extent. We saw an example of a room, I think it was the last meeting, where the chairs were on casters and there were some tiers, but the I don't know what to call it, the benches or desktops or countertops were all fixed.
Right.
And then at some point, you could either switch back and forth between typical lecture mode, or you could do some group work by having each alternate row of chairs turn their seats around and facing the other people because they're on the same level at that point. And I think that'd be a great example of doing that, where you don't have to walk into a room and say, oh crap, all the tables are all over the place, what am I gonna do again? Because something is immobile and the seats are still there, but the seats might go back and forth as needed. So that could go a long way towards that. It's not perfect,
And I
but I don't
think
know what
that,
is.
you know, when we're thinking long-term, like 20 years, we have this model of meet 3 times a week for an hour or twice a week for.
Oh, that's a
whatever.
whole separate issue, I agree with you.
So,
Yeah.
so maybe the thing that we do in the large classroom is gonna be something that happens online before they come to class. And so maybe we won't be meeting twice a week for 3 hours, maybe we're meeting once a week for an hour and a half, and then another hour and a half, they're doing something that's there. And so there
Hybrid
won't be a
classes
need for
are-
200
hybrid
person
classes, yeah.
classrooms, because we'll be doing some hybridy thing. So, but I don't know the answer to that.
I guess one
But
of
in
the
fall
questions.
2013, I'll probably have 200, so.
One of the questions is there's a difference between where we're going to be in the next few years and what we need to pilot the most.
Right.
Okay, because there might be some things like classrooms like this that we kind of already know how to do it, and people are doing it all over the country.
Right.
Okay, but the bigger ones, I
Right.
think there's
The
more
transition
room
is
for
quicker.
understanding how they work better.
Absolutely.
And so maybe that needs to be piloted.
Good point.
I spoke in favor of at least one large space. I'm afraid that the realities of modern university are gonna still require us to have large enrollment classes at times. but there are innovative ways to engage interactively a large number of students and even give students more responsibility for their learning. I think having one large interactive space that's innovative in its design, that'll allow flexibility in terms of trying some of these new models for learning of large numbers of students would be an important experimental facility that I would love to have included as early as possible.
And large to you is what?
Well, I would say as large as it can be accommodated in
Okay.
this space. I mean, we've got some inflexibility in terms of the mechanical spaces here. You don't want to have a large space with a mechanical space and a mechanical object in the middle that obscures, I think, that may not be very, very useful. So I think you've got to see what's the largest space you could carve out of that and still make it a useful teaching space. And then how large can that be? But then I think having some smaller size spaces is useful also, because we don't want to do it all in one large space. And this seems to lend itself to having some variety as we've designed here. You know, one space, see how large you can get it, and then maybe a small size and a medium size. It gives us the opportunity to explore a variety of spaces and configurations.
Okay, it's 4:30, and we promised to get you out at 4:30, but I do wanna just say that I think we've had a really great conversation, and I think we've given you a lot of things to really think about. I really like the idea of trying to get a large classroom in there, and let's go in there and play and figure out,